Welcome to this episode of Young Bosses Podcast, where we inspire and encourage young entrepreneurs to live life like you own it. Hi, I'm Tom Dutta. I am the guest host today, and we've created this to bring millennials together and build a healthy society. This episode is produced by Crop Studios and Drishti Media Group. It's sponsored by Parminder Chauhan and Desjardins. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and youngbosses.ca. Well, welcome to the show, Vedanshi Vala. It's a pleasure to have you here on the Young Bosses Podcast.
Thank you. I am very, very excited to be here and chat with you today.
Yeah, thank you. You know, we've just been talking offline before we got started here. I think we talked about so many different things.
Yep.
And I just want to have some fun up front and say, what's it like for somebody to call you the boss?
Well, it's quite interesting. I think in our team, we try and create like a very linear structure. Like, even though I may be the executive director, like I try to be super approachable. But yeah, when I'm talking to, other people, potential partners, and they find out I'm the executive director, they're like, "Oh, hi, Miss Vala." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just a kid, Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So today is all about you. We're going to put the spotlight on you, and I'm so inspired by what I've learned about you. But why don't we start off by asking you this? Tell us one thing that you think most people don't know about yourself.
I think what people don't know about me is that, I've been a dancer of almost 7 years now, and my sister and I are very, very competitive. So we dance together, and we perform on stage often, and it's really nice to be performing with my sister, but we're pretty competitive as well.
All right. Well, there you have it, everybody. A competitive dancer, but competitive with your sister.
Yeah.
I think you and I got to talk because I got two brothers, and I think I got notes we got to share there. I want to tell everybody a bit about Vedanshi because there's such greatness behind you. I want to tell everyone about the depth behind what you've done. Now, we know this is the Young Bosses Podcast, and I don't look at you as somebody young. I look at you as a leader and a human being. But man, have you ever done some great things. So everyone, Vedanshi is a second-year student in her Bachelor of Science at UBC. I'll tell you, COVID, lots of changes we'll talk about. We know you're a dancer, but I love this about what I read in the bio. It says you're a thinker and a learner. That's really inspiring. You believe in creating safe communities for everyone, and most especially empowering women. And that passion led you to co-found the Bolt Safety Society.
That's right.
And for those watching this episode, Bolt, B-O-L-T, and in fact, I have a press release that we're going to get into in just a moment. And there's much more that you've done. You've done work in the nonprofit sector, raising the awareness through this incredible society about sexual violence, and most recently gearing up for August 31st launch of what you're calling Safe Hubs.
That's right.
Incredible. You've done collaboration with many businesses in this particular project. I'm fascinated you're the co-founder and executive director, and also lab assistant at UBC Research, BC Heritage Fairs Society Provincial Junior Alumni Council. You've done leadership there.
Yeah.
Officer of St. John Ambulance. I'm going like, wow. I mean, I'm also so inspired by you at your young age to be doing all this. So what I like to do is just really get into your story. They say that it's not what you say, but how you make people feel. And so sometimes storytelling, our brains are wired for that narrative. And I'm fascinated. So take us back to where it started. I know you were born somewhere like all of us. You're an immigrant, but take us back to where it was and take us forward up to the point of where you came to this country, Canada.
Sure. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, first of all. I'm equally honored to be sitting here with you. You're very accomplished yourself. Thank you. So I guess just going all the way back, I was born in India, and we immigrated. First we moved to Kuwait, where my dad had a job there, and from there I came to Canada when I was in grade 2. So I've got a bit of a mixed childhood between a few countries, but when we ended up here in Canada, we made our home in Burnaby and then Richmond, that's where I am right now.
And that's amazing to me about becoming an immigrant, because I want to tell you that in the journey I took, I think we talked earlier about my coming to Canada, I was about the same age. And many young leaders I meet who have come to our country of Canada, it's a scary thing. It's not easy to make that journey. It's leaving a place that, there's beliefs and comfort. And then you come into a new world, and sometimes even the language barriers that many young immigrants face. Tell me about that experience, the biggest, if you had any fear or challenge of actually settling into this place that you didn't know.
I think what I distinctly remember is the accent, because as someone that had learned English when I was in Kuwait, I had the Indian accent, and I mean I say this with pride, there's nothing wrong with it. But when I came here, I noticed that all of my classmates, they were speaking in a very, very different way from the way that I sounded, and I remember that was the biggest thing that I tried to change about myself, was the way that I used the English language. And there's this really funny story. I was in class, and our teacher was teaching us a bunch of different words, and one of the words was alligator. So I emphasized that the different syllables of that word so much. I was like, alligator. And it was really funny. And people probably thought that it was super weird that I was speaking these words in such an emphasized way, but I was really just trying to adjust and adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And would you think the world's changed since? I mean, when you came to Canada, being a next generation, but 20, 30 years before that, many immigrants who came here, the world was very different, right? Mm-hmm. Do you recall, even through your parents' experiences or others, what Canada might have been like back then?
I mean, not through my parents necessarily, because we came to Canada at the same time, but I do know that, we were at different times in our lives. I came when I was in grade 2, and my sister was even younger than that. My parents were already coming in as professionals, with their education, already having experience. They had their own company back in India as well. And so they were coming in to join the workforce, whereas I was just getting integrated into the community here. So it was a very different journey for all of us in that aspect. In terms of other people, because of my work with the BC Heritage Fair Society, I've, seen a lot of Heritage Fair projects that talk about immigrant stories. And I can definitely say that based on what these young students have presented, times have changed, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a few years apart. I'm not saying how many, but I remember when I came here, and life's not a straight line up, right? It's a journey, and you and I talked about being open and honest. So I wear it on my sleeve. That when I came here, I looked different, and I was truly an immigrant because there weren't many South Asians here, and I was picked on, called Hindu, raghead, and there was this prejudice, and I didn't understand that because when you grow up, they don't teach you. Your parents don't tell you, you're going to be different. And I struggled with that. And then over time, as Canada, the immigration, and it became like a rainbow. And so what's interesting to me is coming into this country, starting your life, and then finding your way into your passions and your purpose, business, the things that we're going to talk about now. I'm really interested to know the roots of where you thought of, what do I want to be? Here I am in Canada. What should I do? So I'm going to take a minute to read a press release that I was sent. This blew me away, actually, and I'm being totally holding back on this because everybody, it's so inspiring. There's this press release across my desk, and it says for immediate release, and it's titled "The Silent Pandemic. Youth create a network of safe places for domestic abuse survivors." And this was August 24th, by the way. And in this time of crisis, we must support those fighting the silent pandemic of domestic abuse happening behind closed doors, says Vedanshi Vala, co-founder of the Bolt Safety Society. Now, just think about that for a minute. Here's somebody coming to the country, and this is what you create. And it blew my mind for a few reasons, because you've tapped into a thread of society that is so not talked about. And in fact, in all cultures this exists. I grew up in the South Asian culture, and these threads in my childhood existed in my home and with my aunts and uncles, and you just didn't talk about it. Well, today we need to talk about it. Absolutely. So listen, what I want to do is I want to ask you this. They say that, if I say the word passion, what does that mean to you?
I think passion to me means a drive, a purpose, what gets you going. you know?
Yeah.
And for me, that passion is making people feel safe in their homes, at school, in their communities. So passion to me is what gets me going, what makes me want to do things, what makes me want to change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'm a fan of TED Talks. And
Yeah.
you got to watch some TED Talks, everybody, because they're so educational. And
You should watch Tom's TED Talk.
Well, all right. Well, that came out. I wasn't expected. But yes, I did do a TED Talk recently. Hardest thing to do, by the way. But you should do a TED Talk because TED Talks are about what they call ideas worth spreading. Mm-hmm. And when I saw this, I thought this is an idea that we're spreading, but it's a twist because it's an idea that's been there, but nobody's wanted to talk about it. There's a stigma around it. So here's what I'm going to say is in this TED Talk, they talk about passion. And they say most people don't discover their passion. They're on this unthinking treadmill of life, and they don't stop to reflect. Some people, tell me what you think about this when I give it back to you. In the South Asian culture, a lot of parents, they're wonderful people like my parents, but they want you to be doctors. They want you to be lawyers. They want you to be accountants. And so we grow up having someone else tell us what they think we should be, and they do it with love. But we don't find what our passion is. We go out and sometimes people get into things that they go, this is not really where I belong. A passion, they say, when somebody finds it, the TED Talk said that most people don't follow their passion. You want to know why? Because they think people laugh at them. If I want to be a painter, it doesn't pay the bills. And so why this connected to me on that is you've created this not-for-profit society. You're not collecting a paycheck. You're doing this, and all of your team
That's right.
as volunteers. This is a passion, and yet something's driving you to do it regardless. So I want to give it back to you now and ask you to go deep on that as much as you can, that my passion is advocating for mental health, particularly for abused children and abuse within a home. That's why this is so exciting. But we come into the world and we don't know about abuse. Our brains are empty. Our neurons don't have thoughts or emotions. And we somehow discovered these things. Where in your lifeline did you first start seeing these things of abuse and these things that are behind closed doors? What's your experience, whether it's lived or through others?
Yeah. Actually, just going back to what you talked about earlier, growing up in an Indian family, I definitely agree with you. Like, I've heard from a lot of my friends that, their parents are telling them either doctor, engineer, or lawyer, and nothing else, But I do want to be a doctor. And I think what's different for me, and it ties in with how I found my passion, is my parents have always been very open-minded as to what my sister and I want to do when we grow up. And part of it is because I think they were very open-minded. The fact is, like, neither of my parents are doctors, engineers, or lawyers. Like, they both have backgrounds in architecture. And I think that that more creative profession gave them a perspective that they were able to pass on to myself and my sister. So I think that having an open mind, especially from a parental perspective, was really important in my growth and journey. That's sort of where this passion ties in. I've always wanted to help people. And obviously, like you said, I didn't know that the day I was born. I'm going to go up and help people in the world. But I think my parents always taught me about compassion and kindness. And that's just the way that I was raised. And that's the reason that I decided to just go around this route. In terms of why sexual violence and domestic abuse specifically, I am very lucky to say that I did not have lived experience with these issues, but what I find is that that's no reason for me to not step up to this. Like, I know people that have gone through domestic abuse, and I just wanted to be able to do something to help them. I think at the core of my values is looking out for everyone that I love, everyone I care about, everyone they care and love. So that's sort of where it started. And then I put a team together that was equally passionate about the same thing.
That's pretty awesome. We're going to get into leadership in a little bit. because you are a boss, and bosses are leaders as well.
Thank you.
And so one more thing, just thank you for sharing. I'm going to honor you for sharing that because it's a sensitive topic to talk about, and we need more people in the world like you with the courage to talk about it. And particularly where I come from, South Asian culture, wonderful culture, but the belief systems are different in Canada versus, and some things you talk about, some things you don't. We need a voice to speak about this, and you're part of that voice. I also want to honor your parents. We get a lot of strength from our parents. But what's different for me about your story than some other stories I've heard in the South Asian community, because I mentor and coach people, and even my own, is not all parents have that way.
That's right. Yeah.
They are very insistent. I'm not happy if you're not the doctor. I'm not happy if this. And so I just wrote an article about this, that happiness comes from within. It's not about making your parents happy. Our parents love us, right?
Yeah.
And so we should be growing knowing that we're great. They love us. Doesn't matter what we do, what we accomplish. And so to honor your parents, they had this creativity about saying, go do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And when I look at dancing, I see that creative side of you.
Absolutely.
And there's something about you. There's an aura. When you speak, there's this life and energy. It's just that is the sign of somebody that wants to change the world. I mean, it just comes out of you. And I don't even know yet about what you're doing. I want to go further into this nonprofit. So just take me back. So you have this idea, and I want to use it as a teaching moment. They say Napoleon Hill, who wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. And if people wonder, is it about money and riches? No, it's about, the word is think. Everything in this world is created by a single thought. And then it's created twice. The thought turns into the physical equivalent.
Yeah.
So you had this thought of doing this because you heard from people who were being abused silently in the home.
Yeah.
When you decided to do something and turn it into that thought, just tell us about how you set all this up, because it's been over a period of time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, when we started out, we had no idea what it was going to look like, in 2020. It started, I would say, officially started working on this project in 2017. And at that time, our team was called HPTI, so standing for Harnessing the Power of Technology Through Innovation and Engineering. So at that time, we entered our student team into the Anu and Naveen Jain Women's Safety X Prize.
Right.
And that's sort of where it started. We were basically kicked out of the competition after the first round. We did not have the level of expertise to compete with other companies that were in the competition as well. But from that point on, we decided to continue because as a team, we knew that we weren't just doing this for the competition. We really, really did believe in it. And our idea grew and evolved. And we decided that, let's put the main solution to the side. What are we going to do to make communities safer? But we decided to focus on the educational aspect for a little bit of time. So we interviewed students on what safety meant to them, just going into schools, getting these different perspectives, just trying to get the message out there. We need to be creating a culture of safety. And that means talking to people, educating people, getting more information out there. And from there, our team just kept thinking and thinking. And then actually last year over the summer, and these ideas come to me at midnight, and I will bolt out of bed and be like, oh, wait, this is a fantastic idea. We should do this. And what we did was we made a mobile space on the Wix app. So it's a free platform for anyone to join. And essentially what's on it is we sort of tie together different aspects that in talking with people in the community, we realized this is a multifaceted approach to this problem. So the first one being the safety and self-defense tips. So we have tutorials from, for instance, Dr. Annalyn Conklin. She is a martial artist of over 25 years, also faculty at UBC. We spoke with mental health professionals, as well as UBC's SV Pro, which is the Sexual Violence Prevention and Response Office, and just kept learning and kept adding these resources onto the platform because we realized that telling people this is how you keep yourself safe is not the right way to do it. Because at the end of the day, the problem isn't people not being able to defend themselves. The problem is that there are people out there who think it's okay to hurt people. So that's why we try to have this educational aspect on the platform as well, because we realize that people need to be aware that this is not okay, and this mindset is something that needs to change. And yeah, that's sort of where the idea kind of took off. And now we're a nonprofit working on this.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's almost like a blueprint, like how do I do this and put together my own not-for-profit. And the experience I've had in them, they're not easy to put together. And one of the biggest things is funding. You have to go find that. And I read somewhere that there's a government grant, so you've done a lot of things, I think.
We actually, specifically for the Safe Hubs project, we got a grant from the Rising Youth Program, so through Taking It Global and the Government of Canada through their Canada Service Corps program. And they provided us with a grant to execute the Safe Hubs pilot project. And obviously we're very, very grateful for that because, like you said, as a nonprofit, it's the hardest thing is when you have a team of volunteers, you have the passion, you have the ideas, but it's how do you get it from the idea to actually reality? And that's where the grant comes in.
That's awesome. So let's just talk more about who you're serving. And so what I understand from what you said is that, it's a broad spectrum, people who experience sexual violence, abuse behind closed doors.
Yeah.
So when I give it back to you, just comment, but we could be talking about a parent and a child relationship. We could be talking about a husband and a wife relationship, or even an employer-employee relationship, any relationship where you cross the boundary. What I learned through my own experience is, and for everybody out there, the word abuse means many things.
Yep.
So tell me, what types of abuse, from what you're seeing, do people experience out there?
Actually, I can bring a few statistics into this right now. Just if you literally just Google domestic violence during the COVID-19 pandemic, even before COVID happened, specifically for women, 1 in 3 women are having to face some kind of sexual violence or abuse in their lifetime. And for men, like 1 in 6. And the fact is, like, you could walk into a room and you could be talking to a survivor. Like, it's insane how many people are dealing with this. And then, especially during COVID-19, there have been some resources in the community, like crisis lines, that have seen an increase of over 400% of calls for help. There have been shelters that are completely at capacity, but these volunteers are still doing their very best to find some kind of accommodation. And it just goes to show that this problem is, you might think it's the silent pandemic because you can't hear it, you can't see it happening behind closed doors, but it is so prominent, and we need to do something about that.
Yes.
And people have been doing a lot of things. There have been good people doing good things. We're just really trying to bring all of that together in one place so that there's, a one place kind of, anyone can go on there and find everything they need.
No, that's absolutely amazing. Everybody, this is a teaching moment on the show that, we see that abuse takes many different forms and you can't see it. I want to share with you some personal insight that there's mental health, mental abuse, there's physical abuse, there's sexual abuse. And even now with cyberbullying, my daughter's back east in New Brunswick, I was telling you that, and there's kids in the school there where somebody put something on Facebook, and before the Facebook, you could just say it to somebody, a bully could say it in a parking lot, and then the only people who knew about it were the kids in the parking lot. Now it's viral. And I've come across young and older folks who have felt suicidal or experienced self-worth and wanting to end their life. I don't know if you've had any direct experience. Well, you said people who have had, but I want to, without getting into breaking confidentiality, I just want you to tell me, what does it feel like when you hear somebody tell you their story that somebody hurt them? How do that make you feel, seeing that you've never been through that? Yeah,
you feel almost powerless. And the thing is, like, it's kind of ironic because I'm feeling powerless that I can't help someone, but the person actually going through that, like, what must they be going through, right? So it's just, you just want to really help them and you want to comfort them. And then especially because of COVID, when you are talking to people over the phone or over Skype and you can't actually comfort them in person, it almost feels like there's nothing you can do, and you feel helpless in that way. That's what I felt personally when I heard these stories.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I honor you for sharing that, and the audience watching, if the camera shot your eyes, you can see the emotion. I mean, I can see your eyes in a little bit of glare, and I wanted to share a personal story with you, seeing that you're inspiring me, and we talked about it offline, and this is your interview. But I think I told you that what connected me to your story is my own story, and that I grew up in a home that was full of violence. There was all these abuse. My mom, physical, verbal. My father was a heavy drinker. My dad died a couple of years ago, and I didn't really know him. And when I learned his true story, I learned about how he grew up in India with that same experience in his own home, alcoholism. And so I started studying brain science and thinking, like, how does a human being come into the world that has neurons that are empty of emotions and thoughts and be so damaged or broken that they could hurt somebody? And then when I talked to my father, he told me about how he was raised. And they say hurt people, and you said something incredible. So I grew up in my life as a hurt kid, and I went out into society and excelled, but I struggled all my life with this and mental health and all that. So that's why I dedicated my cause to helping children and youth. And what's happening now is that, as you said, with people like you and what you're doing, the conversation is starting to happen. The resources are there, the text lines. And to all of those watching this show who are suffering in silence, I want to say to you that Vedanshi's work here is incredible. You need to look up this organization, learn, tap into the resources, and hear the stories. And you need to feel safe, and there's no stigma. And for what you're doing, you're giving us a platform for that. Now, I know there's a lot more to what you're doing that we haven't seen yet. I'm so excited about that. So I'm going to ask you, as we go to wrap up just a few minutes, I want to ask you a question about leadership. Bosses are people who tell people what to do. Do you like being told what to do?
That's a really good question. But before I answer that, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, you're welcome.
And all the work that you've been doing. It takes a lot of strength to come forward and to do what you do. So
thank you.
Thank you for doing
so
that.
Much.
And in response to your question, I do. I love being told what to do. It's crazy because I read online, just during my spare time, I was reading this article that said every person that you bring onto your team should be better than you at doing their job. And I can say with confidence that, everyone on my team is amazing at the work that they are doing. And so when I bring up an idea or a concept and they do it 10 times better, all the power to them. So. Well,
there you have it, everybody. And what a great teaching moment. You're building a team to be better with you, and that is exactly what leaders do. When I talk about leadership, my own thinking is leaders create other leaders, and you're an example of a great leader. I so love your story and you and what you're doing here.
Thank you so much.
I want to honor you with a few leadership words. I do this in my head as I'm thinking. You're a trailblazer. You're blazing a trail where people haven't been before. You are love and your passion. I can feel that from your smile, and it's infectious in what you're doing. You're also a hero. Heroism is doing something where you help other people without expectation of reciprocity. You're my hero, particularly in the work you're doing. And the last thing I would say is that you're fun and creative, from the dancing to just your sense of humor. They say when you're going through difficult things, trauma and abuse, that one of the mental health skills that I learned was happy distractions. Do something that makes you happy. Go to dance. And so congratulations for doing those things as well.
Thank you.
We'll wrap up with this, that a study was done in Canada from 90-year-olds, and they asked them, what were your biggest regrets at 90 years of age? When all the data came in, it said, I didn't reflect enough, I didn't take enough risk, and I didn't build a big enough contribution. And so when you're done with this world, with what you're doing here, what will it look like?
Yeah, I mean, who knows, right? And thank you very much for those kind words. I mean, that really means a lot. If we're focusing specifically on the Safe Hubs project, we hope that we can create this network of safe spaces for anyone to go to, victims, survivors, and maybe that's just the first step, and then who knows where that's going to take us.
Well, that's great. So you heard that, everybody. A better, safer world would
Yeah.
be safe hubs. And so thank you for being on the Young Bosses podcast
Thank
today.
you for
Vedanshi.
having me.
It's been a pleasure. And everybody, catch this on your favorite podcast channel. We talked about that up front. Give it a high rating so we can honor the work that Vedanshi's doing and live your life with passion like you see her doing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
You're welcome.